All right. Miss Isabella, thank you very much for doing this with me. I've been thinking a lot about what you were saying this past week when we spoke about how the brain doesn't know the difference between a tangible loss and something more ethereal like a loss of a relationship or a loss of
Right.
um, something intangible. So just tell me again, kind of from your perspective, what loss means. Like, what is it exactly?
So yeah, we're a part of the human condition is we build relationships. We build, micro connections with everything around us, whether that's, small things like our favorite hobbies or our jobs or, things like that, or very, complex things like people and pets and places and our brain doesn't necessarily know like the hierarchy of like what or how significant a loss is supposed to be. So
Mm,
any absence of something that you are very familiar with or very attached to will be received by your body as a loss, and your body will experience grief related to that thing. And sometimes that's a permanent loss, and sometimes that's a temporary loss. Or you can find something to fill the loss, but either way, the body is just reacting to however significant that was to you. So if you're, I think my favorite example is a workaholic, somebody who has made their job their life. If they lose that job or get cut off or hours get, cut, then they have to figure out what the void is now, and they feel that sense of loss of what they did all the time. And then you have the more classic example of loss when we talk about the loss of a person, and that being the permanent absence of somebody in your life.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That you really hit home with that one. I've definitely been accused of being a workaholic in the past, and I think it's still something that I'm trying to figure out. I've gotten a lot better at it, of course, over the years, but it's still a challenge. It really is. Do you have any do you have any idea how the body physically reacts to a loss?
Yeah, the body is unique in a way that it reacts based on like the existing coping mechanisms that a person
Mhm.
already has in place. So that it can look like anything like not having an appetite. That's a big one. A lot of the shows and things that I see, they demonstrate that how the body is processing that loss by you don't feel like eating. Your spirit's down. You don't want to get up and do things. There's a kind of that depression state sets in. There's also like the phantom feeling, almost like you lost a limb or some tangible part of your body because you can't call up that person, you can't go to that job, you can't, hug that pet or whatever that loss is. Your
Yeah.
body is still trying to catch up with your mind and recognizing that that is no longer an option. And so you kind of get stuck in these moments where you're like, oh crap, I can't do what I used to do, and dealing with that kind of phantom pain. There's also, other bad habits that get picked up. A lot of people have resorted to drugs and alcohol to self medicate.
Mm.
With that, you go into even more detrimental side effects like feeling suicidal, not wanting to be here anymore, not wanting to live without them. And it's a very dangerous roller coaster because the body does have such extreme responses to experiencing a loss.
Yeah. And then I did not expect to go this route, but I keep going down this road because I'm just getting more and more interested. What are the healthiest ways to deal with a loss in any respect, whether it be a person or whether it be losing a fish? Because I'm thinking about this in very basic primal ways. When we were just nothing but hunter gatherers, right? And you went out hunting and you lost a prey, that may have been a big deal. If it was like big game
Mhm.
that you were really counting on and you lost it, I can imagine feeling dejected and wanting to give up, right? Because maybe it's a good thing that you give up and try again versus just keep throwing, I guess, good energy after bad if you know you're not going to succeed. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. A big part of it that I tell everybody, the very first thing you need to do is talk about it. We
Yeah.
have gotten so used in society to hide away our problems, to hide away what we're going through because we don't want to make other people feel bad, or, it's not socially acceptable to talk about it. But one of the universal things we can all count on is that we will experience loss in this life in any and every form because eventually we will all die. And so talking about that, whether that's just telling somebody, hey, I'm so sorry. Had this happen. I lost this. I'm not going to be able to go to this event or do this thing. I know my very first experience with it was I had to email all of my professors and tell them I wasn't going to be in school for the week because we had this happen. But I found that talking about it from the get-go, because I'm very observant. So I watched how my mom processed her grief and I watched how my sister processed their grief. And I found that talking about, my dad and talking about, the other loved ones that we've lost made it more bearable. Like my brain was able to come to terms with that loss as a reality now, because I kept talking about it and I kept reminding myself that this had happened. And in processing that, I gave my body an outlet for all of the emotions, all of the feelings, and that made it more easy to actually get through it than trying to bottle it up and pretend like it didn't happen. So first and foremost, you've got to talk about it. Talk about it to somebody you trust. Talk about it to a medical professional if that's what you require. But talking is the first step. The next one, I think, is finding a way to keep their memory alive, a way to keep them with you. There's a TED Talk that I love by David Kessler, and he talks about finding meaning in a loss. And in this TED Talk, I love one of the things he says is that if you talk about somebody, they never truly die because your memory of them is alive. And you talk about them to other people, and other people get to meet them through you and your memories of them. And so that we're able to keep them with us and carry them on. And part of them never dies that way. So I think that, also in that respect of sharing their memory and finding meaning in the loss how to keep going is the best way to do it.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I keep going back to the hunter who just lost his big game. Definitely talking about it I think is important. And then finding some reason, some positive um thing for this happening, whether it's learning from it or something, I think is important. Personally, I have practiced finding some positive in everything. It's kind of the way I keep
Mhm.
myself sane. Like no matter what's happening, I try to find some positive in it. Um, and I can definitely see that being a healthy way to go about coping with loss. Um, so. You mentioned something about, having to call your professors, and that's one of the first things that we talked about, and one of the first things that I thought about when we were discussing this, which is bereavement policies. And
Mhm.
so I did look up some bereavement policies in different countries, and I found some interesting stuff. Okay.
Okay.
The US does not have federal bereavement policies at all. However, there are some states, and of course, there's some companies that do offer them
Mhm.
as benefits. But and I didn't look up all the countries, but Japan, I think their federal policy was I think it was 3 to 4 days based on how close the person was in your family. So if it was immediate family,
Mhm.
it was so many days, and then if they were cousins, then I think it was only like 2 days or something like that. And
A little
then
bit less, yeah.
they also had a stipulation that said that if you were responsible for the funeral arrangements, then you got an additional like 2 days or something like that.
Okay.
Um, Norway had something similar, and it got me thinking like, you talked about the healthy ways to deal with loss, and we know that the body has a very real physical reaction. Um, the question I have is when it comes to bereavement. Um, is it absolutely necessary to have time away from daily responsibilities to deal with the loss, in your opinion?
I think a very small window in the beginning is necessary. I don't think any person can really just bounce back into their normal reality without having that window of time to come to terms with it, at least a little bit. I mean, my family took a week. We took that first week off. My dad passed on a Monday. I was back in school the following Monday and back to work full time the following Monday. And so having that week, allowing that time to process, to think through it, to scream, to cry, to rant, to have the memorial service. I definitely support the idea of everyone taking the time. However, I do feel like we need to get back to some sense of normalcy as sooner than rather than later. A lot of people find that going back to work gives them something else to focus on. Or going back to school gives them, something to take their mind off of what they were going through. And, if that is helpful, if that is a positive in your life, absolutely go back to it. It is going to help you, move on long term. If you're not ready, though, say that. Some people need more time than others. And, one of the things I had wished is I gave myself a little bit more time because I immediately went back to school full time and work full time and kept going and didn't really have a chance to fall apart until the summer when I went down some very bad routes of how to process it. So definitely a little bit of a window I think is necessary.
Yeah, and when I was reading through this stuff, I really started thinking like we talk about how the loss of a dog and the loss of a job is still a loss,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
it may be felt differently um by different people depending on context, depending on what that job meant to you, depending on its value, right? No different than the dog's value in your life. And it got me to thinking about, okay, well, what if the loss means that you have completely uprooted your life? For instance, the loss of a home. If you lose your house by fire, right? Well, all of a sudden, like everything you have is gone. You have to find somewhere to live. Um, that definitely for sure requires um not only bereavement, but it requires literal just time away to figure stuff out. You can't, and I
Yeah.
can't imagine being in a situation, and I'm speaking specifically someone in school, because we were talking about that, right? How a lot of schools don't have bereavement time. But yeah, like if all your stuff goes up in flames, um, how can you be
Yeah.
expected to go right back to studying when you're trying to figure out somewhere to live, you know? Um, that's really crazy. So I kind of got to thinking like, how do we prioritize or not prioritize, but how do we value um certain losses, right? So like I recently lost my mom, and yes, it was a loss for sure, and it was definitely felt. Um, but I imagine it will have been a much bigger loss if I lost her when I was 6. And she was the only person that fed me, clothed me, housed me. You know what I mean? Um, I'm just curious what you have to say about that. Just the different valuing of
So,
law.
yeah, so the very first thing is where that communication is going to come in. We can, first and foremost, we cannot compare loss.
Mm,
And I think that's the mistake we make as a society is we compare, the loss of an animal to the loss of a person or the loss of a job to the loss of an animal. Like that is a big don't do.
mm,
Because what you end up doing is devaluing, somebody else's experience and what somebody else is going through because for them, that is the biggest, most significant loss of their life. So, especially in the example of your mom, yes, would her absence be, have a greater impact if you were, 6 years old and having to go into foster care or some, living with other relatives? Absolutely. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, losing her now, you feel it any differently, if that makes sense. So communication is where that comes in the most. I was so blessed to be able to have professors. And since I made that choice to communicate my needs to professors, I was able to go to school and speak to my professors and say, "Hey, I'm so sorry I couldn't get this assignment turned in. I'm really struggling right now." Or, like anniversaries come up or, birthdays come up or significant holidays come up, and you just have to take that moment to say, "Hey, today's a bad day. I'll get it to you. I'm sorry it's late. We'll talk about that later." But the thing is that because universities and businesses and employers don't already have something there that makes
Mhm.
people feel like it's okay to talk about it and it's okay to reach out when they need help, they don't. And they suffer in silence. And their performance is gonna dip. Their enthusiasm for the job is going to be less. Their willingness to turn in assignments or even do well on their assignments lessens because they don't care. Or they do care, but they don't have the energy to put into it because they're already being sucked dry by, processing their grief and getting out of bed and breathing. So a big thing with it is you have to communicate what your needs are. I firmly believe that no two grief stories are the same and that no one grieves alone. That's actually the no one grieves alone is the slogan for my nonprofit. That is our first primary message. So the main thing is when you lose someone or something or your life is disrupted, if you are feeling any kind of loss, someone, and my organization works to do this, but someone needs to sit down with you and say, "Hey, how can I help? Where are you struggling? What happened?" Giving that space to have your story told allows, your needs to be met in ways that actually help you. So if like you're fine that work's not your problem, but maybe getting out of the house is the problem because once you get home from work, you don't want to go anywhere and that's putting you in a bad space when you get home and making it harder. You might need someone to say, "Hey, let's go out for dinner. Let's go see a movie. Like let's do something else," in a way that you're going to receive because you've already stated this is what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I say, it's really interesting to me because I never really put a lot of thought into it. But like you said, loss is something that is very for lack of a better word, very common to the human condition. It's something that everyone will deal with, whether it be a family member or you know a toy, like whatever. Um, and how we choose to deal with that loss matters a lot. And we also need and the space and the comfort of knowing that, we can grieve for whatever it is. I'm curious what your thoughts are on where the line is, because that's what I'm always interested in. It's like, where's
Mhm.
that line, right? Because obviously, there comes a time where it's like, okay, you're overreacting to this, right? I think I forget the name of the condition, but I think it's something like the hoarders, where they just
Okay.
cannot stand to lose even like a piece of trash, right?
Mm.
Where can we start looking for that line to say, okay, this is okay to grieve, but then this is not.
I think that line, I'm always gonna go back to it's different for every person. But as a society, I think the line should be that 1 year. We need to normalize the conversation of loss so much that when you get to that 1 year mark, you're not just now starting to grieve.
Mhm.
I've always felt like if you can find your new normal and your meaning and be upfront in your grieving journey the first year, year two seems to get a little better. Like for me, I found that literally I woke up the day after the anniversary and felt like I could breathe again and was able to just, go on because I had been processing this whole time. So many people put off processing because they don't want to deal with it or they're in denial or, they're just not, they're like, oh, I can't focus on this right now. I've got to do this. That, you put it off for so long that eventually it will always come to you. It doesn't go away because you said, oh, I can't deal with this right now. It waits until you can. And so I think, a big part of that is finding that line. I would love to see employers and universities have a set policy for that first year so that way, you're given access to those resources, but you're aware that it does have a cutoff. You're aware that it does have, an expiration date because the idea is not to make it something that we're using to excuse all behavior from here on out.
Right.
That's not the goal. The goal is to have it so that way, like any kind of illness or medical leave or family leave or any other way that we deal with time off and needing accommodations, you know that it's available when you need it. And hopefully you take advantage of having it as something there so that way you don't need it come year two. There are still times where I'm like, oh, I don't really want to go to school today. And there are days that I have to email my professors and say, hey, my dad's birthday's today. I'm not in a good space. I'm not going to be in class. That still goes back to that communication thing, but it does become one of those things where you get to that point and maybe not overreacting, but simply that you're going to find meaning in a loss of any kind into one of two ways. Either that is going to be the thing that, launches you into the next stage of your life and helps you have an impact and helps you rise the bar and get your life together, or it's going to be the excuse for everything. I can't do this because I lost somebody. I can't get a new job because I lost my job. I can't, find a new place to live because mine burned down. Like it's always going to come down to a choice. And I think that the main thing is we need more people educated on what are good responses and what are bad responses. So when these situations come up, you have someone in your HR department or somebody in your school accommodations that is trained in recognizing, is this a healthy coping skill? Is this a bad coping skill? Are we making excuses or are we actually trying to take it day by day? And can facilitate what those resources look like. Because yes, it will absolutely become a thing where if not handled well and handled up front, it'll define the rest of your life. And if you let it define the rest of your life, then you fail to meet your potential. And at the end of the day, like that's only on you. So absolutely there is a line. And it really does take having more people educated on what that line looks like and what is healthy coping and healthy grieving versus non-healthy coping and grieving.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing that's really big is changing um what loss looks like. I think everyone
Mhm.
has an idea of what loss is, but not everyone connects grief with loss, right? Like I remember a good friend of mine years ago grew up thinking that this guy was his dad, right?
Mhm.
And so he had formed relationships with cousins and a whole family, through this guy. And then one day he finds out that that's not his dad. And now that I sit here, I think like, yeah, that was definitely a loss, but I don't think anyone saw it that way at the time. And
Yeah.
so, because it's not recognized as a loss, then there is no room or expectation of grief or what
Mhm.
that grieving process needs to look like in order to go forward. And if you don't grieve, then like you said, at some point it's going to come back to hit you. And it may happen when you least expect it. And so I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing right now, just for the general public to recognize what a loss is and when they do experience that, how to best process that grief. So you talked about your nonprofit and I know we talked about doing surveys and stuff like that, but just tell me now, since we have the time now, exactly what your nonprofit does, how'd you come up with it, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So my nonprofit is From Grief to Healing, FG2H for short. And we work as a third party service to raise awareness and to meet the needs of the general community while they are experiencing grief. The biggest part of that comes down to, we need people to come to us and say, hey, I need help. Or for, to say, like, I know somebody who is grieving and they're not in a good spot. Can you help them? Because, we're going to raise awareness. I personally have taken it upon myself to be like the face of the nonprofit. So like, I do these interviews, I do podcasts, I do, all these different kind of meetings and raise awareness for it because that's a big part. You were talking about living grief. That's what it is when you lose somebody, but they're still here. And the loss of a relationship and the loss of something in your life is a form of living grief. And that's a whole other topic conversation that people don't even recognize as is a form of loss. So we work to raise that awareness, to bring those ideas out there so that people understand, like, oh, this is grief. Oh, I am, losing somebody and experiencing this, and I can relate to this. And, we share that from multiple different platforms, whether that be media you already see, TV shows, movies, music, or in books or anything like that, but also in like what resources the community already has. So I love to partner, school resources with students if they need it, or if they feel I don't want school associated with my healing journey. Okay, great. Let's find resources in the community. And so we work to do that. We're currently only in the Northeast Louisiana, specifically Ouachita Parish. We're working on branching out, but we're starting with schools and their communities. I actually just found some interesting statistics the other day that schools make up 40 something percent of the employment force of the communities that the school is in, especially your college towns. And so if that's the case, and then 37 to 44% of students are losing someone every 2 years, you have a big hit to your employment force as well. Because if they can't function, they can't work. Or they do work, but you're not getting the quality you're paying for. You're not getting the person you hired. You're getting a ghost of that person. And so I found that really interesting. And as we're talking about that and raising that awareness, the other thing is we are going to be looking at putting those policies in place. I have contacts within the University of Louisiana school system to try to get, LSU and ULM and UL and Grambling and Tech and all of these other universities to put a bereavement policy in place so that current and future students can utilize it if necessary. And so as we're working with all of that, it is the idea of that. And then personally, I'm a psych major in my final year of my bachelor's degree, and I am working with the University of Louisiana Monroe to one, my thesis, which is about looking at songs about grief and music about loss and how it's composed and running it through language models and finding universal themes within the songs that can, define grief. So that way, when people come to me and say, "Oh, I lost my mom," like I don't know what to do, and I don't know how I should feel, I can say, well, you're unique. You're not going to feel everything that everybody else feels. However, it is common for people to feel X, Y, and Z. And having those common themes available, that way it's not a stage. It's not a outline of what you should prepare month 1 through 3 to look like, or month 9 through 6 to, or 6 through 9 to look like. But it's saying, okay, it's normal to feel sad. It's normal to feel anger. It's normal to feel these emotions. So when you do feel them, you don't feel crazy. You don't feel like this is not the way that you're supposed to be feeling, but you do feel like that's acceptable. And, other people have felt that too. And then the other thing I'm working with the university to do is a survey study that will enable us to ask students about how, they're doing academically, and then asking them if they've experienced a loss. If they can say, yes, I've experienced a loss while in college, then they answer a bunch of questions about grief and how they're processing and how that, they're understanding it. And then it goes into how are you performing academically? Did you lose sleep? Did you lose, did your grades suffer? All these kind of things. And then hobbies. Do you have a life outside of school? Are you engaging in things that are not, required of you because you're a student or an employee? Are you finding that balance? And we're looking to, the big thing is we're looking to see how is grief affecting students at the University of Louisiana Monroe, and how can we help them moving forward to know that it's okay if you go through this, but we also, the goal is to help you do well. One of the current statistics is of the 37 to 44% of college students who lose somebody, 30% of those will fail to obtain their degrees because that grief and that loss is so tangent in their life that they cannot follow through with school and they pull out and they never go back. And we're hoping to lower that statistic by getting the right resources put in place so that they can grieve well and succeed while they're in college.
Yeah, yeah. That's something else that I thought about in the space between us meeting and now. And I don't know if this is going to sound callous or not, but I was thinking about inconvenient death versus convenient death.
Hmm.
Um, I just had my uncle pass last month, and it was it's funny because I think, and I can't speak for anyone other than myself, but uh, for me, I I don't always. I know that I've been affected by something emotionally,
Hmm.
but I don't always know how I'm being affected, or I don't understand why I'm being affected, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was just all discombobbled with scheduling and trying to figure out um how I was going to attend the funeral. And I remember saying, man, he really picked an inconvenient day to
Yeah.
die. You know what I mean? And my friend laughed and was like, "Oh, that's horrible." I'm like, "No, seriously. Like, if you would have just waited like 2 more weeks." Um, but it got me thinking though about, again, inconvenient versus convenient. Personally, I haven't had any inconvenient deaths in my life. Thank God, right? Like when I was in school, no one passed. As a child, I think that's another one, right? When not necessarily like when I think about convenient and inconvenient deaths, I'm thinking like if you're a child and you're living with your parents and your parents die, that's a very inconvenient uh death, right? And I don't know where I was going with this, but
No, I understand what you're saying though. So yeah, I truly believe all death is inconvenient. But I think that the level of inconvenience is different.
yeah,
And that goes back to the strength of the relationship attached to whoever, passed. Because for me, yeah, my dad's death was really inconvenient. It happened in February of 2023, about a month into my semester. And so I'm having to go from February to May in school and trying to make it work. But then, that in December of that year, we lost my grandfather.
yeah,
And he had been battling with cancer for 12 years. So it was kind of expected. Like they had come over for Thanksgiving. They live in Georgia. And when they came over in Thanksgiving, we had dinner and my mom was showing them her store. And then when we left that night, in my car driving to my house, I hit me. I was like, that will be the last time I see him. And so in the sense, like, I was kind of prepared for it, but at the same time, like, because I wasn't in school, I was able to go to Georgia and attend his funeral service. And, I had a very different reaction to losing my grandfather than I did to losing my dad because my dad was my person. I went to him for everything. It was massively inconvenient not to be able to call him up and,
right.
tell him about this or tell him about that or, talk to him and have him there. So yeah, I definitely think that all death is inconvenient. um, the impact that it has in your life sometimes works out a little bit nicer than others. And so, there is those times, but that's one of the things we don't talk about. People think that it's inappropriate to say, oh, well, I wish this would have come at a better time. Like, I really wish that, you could have just waited a little bit longer, but that's part of the process, that's part
Right,
of the,
right.
you know, going through it and accept coming to terms with it is like, you have a lot of other stuff going on, at the same time. And, so no, death is never convenient. Any kind of loss is never convenient for you, but I think definitely the way that you handle it and like, how you prioritize that. I had that same kind of thing happen where I lost a great uncle of mine earlier this year. I didn't really have a relationship with him. I met him maybe half a dozen times in 25 years of existence. And when he passed, I had, people on my biological side of my family reaching out and trying to say, are you coming to the service? And I'm like, I can't. It's not that I don't want to, it's not that I don't care for him or, I'm not a little sad that he died, but I am in school and I'm working full time and I'm running a life, here and I've got responsibilities and my relationship to him wasn't as essential in my life to where I felt like I needed to take off to attend that and to be a part of that. And that's okay. Like that is completely normal. Some losses you need the day. Some losses you need a week. Sometimes more than that. Like when my great grandmother passed, I was back to school the next day. And people were like, "Oh, you missed the class yesterday." And I was like, "Yeah, I had to attend a funeral." And they're like, you know, and it was just one of those things where I was like, I didn't hurt as much with her loss. One, it's a lot easier when you lose multiple people because at least they have somebody on the other side with them. My family has talked a lot about, nobody that we lose from here on out will hurt as bad as losing my dad because he gets more people to be with on the other side. And
Mm,
he's got more, family there with him. It's the same with our dogs, when we lose our dogs and we have one that's like 15, 16 years old. And when she goes, she's going to get to go with dad. And we know dad is going to take care of her. So it's a little bit more comforting, I guess is the best way to say that. So absolutely, you know, some grief is not as convenient as others and it's not as cohesive with what you've got going on than other times, and it really comes down to one, it's okay to put yourself first. That person's gone, they probably don't care if you attend their services or not. There's a quote from a movie I love that says the funeral is for the surviving. The
mhm.
funeral is for the living, because the dead
Yep.
is already gone. It's giving us that moment to pay our respects and to, come to terms with it and to get that closure. And so, if that's not what you need in your experience, if you don't want to attend the funeral, that's good. You need to be able to give your space time to ask yourself, what do I need? How can I best handle what I've got going on? Because nobody else can tell you how to grieve. Not your family, not your friends, or what society says, not me, not anybody else. All we can do is have that conversation so that way individuals can come to terms with it on their own and say, okay, this is what I need. This is how I'm going to deal with this loss. And it changes. There's a running like reel that I've seen a couple times where they talk about the first pew at a funeral.
Mm,
They say that hits different. They that the person speaking, she says, I've never had to sit at the first pew of a
mm,
funeral. Because when you sit for that first pew, it's a whole different experience. That person was a primary figure in your life. Your whole world has been shattered. But when you're sitting in the back pews or you're attending for the family, not necessarily because of the person lost, then you're able to dissociate a little bit, to detach from it just a little bit, and still feel it. Like I had that conversation about my grandfather. I was like, I didn't get a lot of time to get to know him. He was sick the whole time I knew him. But when he passed, I wasn't so much concerned about myself and my own process grieving. Like I felt okay, but I knew that my grandmother and all of his daughters who lived, in Georgia with them and spent the majority of their time with him, they were hurting the way that I was hurting when I lost my dad. And so I was hurting for them. I felt bad for them, like I wanted to be there for them and to support them and help them, but it wasn't as, all-consuming kind of grief as it was when I lost my dad. So absolutely, different forms of loss have different, impacts on your life.
Uh, you brought up something that reminded me of something else we talked about, and I made a little note here so I can go back to it. But I wanted to touch on something that hit me while we were going through your nonprofit and what you are looking to do with it. And I don't know where this is going. So you got to help me out with this, okay? All
Okay.
right. Okay. So our our educational system, okay, our public educational system is designed to ensure that our nation has the necessary skill set to make our great country what it is.
Hmm.
So we have the literacy movement back in the day. Now, mostly we can all read, right?
Right.
I think that's directly related to the public school system. We teach math, we teach basic science, right? We teach basic history. And now I think as a society, we are moving towards mental health awareness, right?
Agreed.
And I think it's very important that we learn this, that we first recognize what it is, how to deal with it. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, if we don't teach it in schools, we can't expect it to be taught at home if it's
Mm.
never been taught to the parents.
Yeah,
And I feel like you can't really teach it to the adults because there's no grand room to put everyone in to say, hey, here's this information. You know what I mean? You
yeah,
can kind of push it out here and there. If some read the books, they do, but if they don't,
absolutely.
yeah. So my thinking then is that what our educational system is? Do we insert things into the system to permeate the culture, right? Do we give the kids information that they then will take home and spread amongst the elders? And then as they become older, they'll pass it on to the kids. Is that your thought process behind this?
I would love to see that happen. So
Yeah.
we actually, it's kind of fascinating because you don't even introduce psychology courses into the public school system until high school.
Right.
That was the first time I took any kind of psychology class. And the thing that, just like any other science, like, biology or chemistry or anything like that, we know just about everything there is to know about the human body and plants and animals and chemistry because that's been studied and hard sciences have existed forever. However, a lot we're psychologists are coming to find that a lot of what we believe to be understanding about the mind and who we are and how we got to be here and the study of the brain is so vastly understudied. Like
Yeah.
there's so much we don't know. I would love to have educators, specifically those with, a basis in psychology at different levels, incorporating that into the younger schools. And maybe not necessarily as a class, but having people coming in and speaking about it. Because if you put a grief course in in primary school, so you're thinking kindergarten to fifth grade,
Hmm.
that might be a lot. But if, maybe once a semester held a assembly that had somebody like me coming in and talking about loss, how it's okay, what it looks like, kind of and various different mental health aspects. That's a big thing that I push with the nonprofit is that I can't talk about grief without talking about several other mental health illnesses, depression, anxiety, poor coping skills, they're all interrelated.
Yeah.
So I would love to see our education system getting more and more inclusive with that. There are so many things that we worry about putting into the school system and that people want to focus on and push, but we're neglecting the most fundamental parts of it. Because people shouldn't be learning who they are in their 20s after 12 years of schooling and, dealing with, I mean, thinking about it, the majority of suicidal ideations and mental health conditions arise in middle school. So if you have the vast majority of your middle schoolers developing these mental health conditions because they were never taught how to cope, they were never taught that it's okay to be yourself because we're being given all of this information and our parents aren't teaching that to us. And so it's up to each individual student to rise or sink based on, their own personal intuition. And I mean, yeah, I think we could curb a lot of that. And COVID-19, I think the biggest impact that COVID-19 gave us is the push to mental health awareness. Because when you're all stuck at home, and nobody can go out and nobody can socialize, so many more mental health issues became apparent because they were like, I don't have anybody to distract me. I'm only with myself. I have to deal with myself. And then you figure out you don't like yourself. And that it opened a lot of doors and a lot of, communication. I think the biggest thing is, something we heard at that conference we were at over the weekend was them talking about how, oh, well, their parents, would tell them we don't talk about that or we
Exactly
just
what I
push
was
through,
talking
we
about.
just get through it.
Hmm.
And literally, you have, our grandparents who are, oh, we don't talk about mental health at all. Like, we're not crazy. We can do this, and just trying to sheer force of will it. And then we have our parents who are a little bit more like, no, like this is something we talk about, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. To our generation, that is like, no, it does matter. When I made the switch to psychology, I had a conversation with somebody and they were like, "Why would you go from pre-med to psychology?" And I remember telling them that if I can change somebody's mind, if I can, in speaking like this, and this being posted online or talking to a room of people, if I can change somebody's mind, I can change generations, and the ripple effect of that is so much greater than being a medical doctor and a physician, because a physician can change someone's present or future. If you can change somebody's mind, you can change everything for everyone that they're associated with, and that impact is so much greater. So I would love it. That is definitely would be like, ultra goal, something like this nonprofit I'm hoping stays running for, years and decades to come, and it becomes this national thing. Absolutely. We want to get into talking to schools and at least, maybe not classes necessarily. I don't think there's really a core curriculum you can push on people because it's not a core curriculum type of, process. Everybody's unique, but having that space for somebody to come in and say, "Hey, how many people, have experienced loss? And let's talk about it." I think that would be beautiful. That is the kind of society I want to build and I want to see for our future.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the more I think about it, the more just what's the word I'm looking for? The more grander it seems. Like it's just
Hmm.
too much to even try to do, but it's necessary. It just is. It's something that has to be done. There has to be um like you said, like a grief course or
Hmm.
some type of education on just mental health. Like
Yeah.
how do you first of all, how do you recognize what your mental health is? How do you recognize what you're feeling, what you're going through? And then secondly, how do you deal with it, right? And
Hmm.
like you said, it's like right now, it's very hard to imagine that being anything in a core curriculum. But by God, it's got to get there because if
Yeah,
we don't have that, then we I just can't see us getting any better. I'll tell you
absolutely.
just real quick. So my passion is financial literacy. And I have for many years seen how everything really connects with each other. right? Your mental health, your physical health, your financial health, your spiritual health, they're all tied together. And if any
Absolutely.
one of those things are off, it's going to affect the other, just the way it is, right? And so when you talk about a core curriculum, I mean, in reality, that's what though that's what the curriculum ought to be. It ought to be mental health, spiritual health, emotional, or not, I'm sorry, physical health, mental health, uh,
Spiritual, financial,
financial health. I'm missing one. What did I just miss?
spiritual.
Spiritual health, yeah. And I don't know, you know, thank God for those that come up with curriculums.
Hmm.
That is not my talent, but I've seen it though, and I think
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Um, there is a young lady in our ward, and I went to a lesson with them, and she had drew out on the paper the lesson. And I was like, listen,
Hmm.
I've been involved in a lot of these. I've never seen anyone bring props before, But the way
Oh.
that she
Yeah.
illustrated it, and she used different colors and labels, and I was just like, I'll remember this for the rest of my life. I was
Right.
like, you have a real talent for this. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think for us right now, we're seeing it as just this great big thing. I don't know how it's going to be done, but for those that have the talent of creating those curriculums, I
Hmm.
definitely think it can be done, and I really think is really necessary, because, like you said, a lot of these mental, um, I'm not going to say illnesses, but mental and emotional problems do start in childhood.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
yeah, I remember. I remember when I was maybe 8 or 9, and I mean, I was really going through it. I was
Hmm.
really, really going through it, and I never told anyone because I. It's not like I was told not to say anything.
Right.
Just I just didn't
Nobody
know
talked
any
about it.
better.
You thought you weren't, you couldn't talk about it.
Well, to be honest with you, and I still feel like this today. I still feel like this today. Many times I feel like my feelings are stupid.
Hmm.
I am so dumb for feeling this way. So, of course, I'm not going to tell anyone because number one, it's a bit embarrassing, right? And number two, it's dumb. Just get over it. Just, okay, cry in the mirror, do
There's
what
the
you got to
generational
do.
trauma.
Right. But just get past it, okay? This is stupid, right?
Oh,
And it's so crazy, but that was my mentality when I was 9 years old.
yeah,
And I don't think there's any adult, right, that's going to say, oh, yeah, at 9, that's appropriate. That's what we want you to do, you know?
right.
And
Well,
I
they
love,
say that the core of like who you are,
mm,
your ability to, your basic development occurs from years 1 to 7. So what
mm,
we're seeing is that between 7 and 15, you're having those mental health crises because they're taking everything they've absorbed before they were 7 because parents, they're stuck on that, oh, you're throwing a tantrum, stop it, you look dumb. And like we're not showing children how to emotionally regulate. And
right,
so not they're getting to that point when they can start making decisions for themselves and they reach that age of accountability at 7 years old that, or I'm sorry, 8 years old, they're they're making decisions based on what they've learned. And because they haven't learned it and nobody is teaching it to them now, then they
mm,
start to repeat old patterns. You start to
yeah,
reiterate and spit out every piece of, thought that you've been given, and they're called core limiting beliefs.
mm,
This idea of like you're not valuable or you're not worth it, or all of that is science shows that our core limiting beliefs are predetermined or saying to be set in stone between the years of 1 and 7. And so if that is really occurring and we're not breaking the cycle there, then it just repeats and it gets worse and it gets more broken the older and older and older that we get. So and I think that, like I said, I don't necessarily think that that needs to be a class because every person is going to have a different take on it. But I definitely think we need to be having assemblies. We need to be having, special addresses. We need to be teaching parents, like it needs to be core hand in hand of in the classroom, at school, plus how do we help the parents recognize that this is not their children, disrespecting them or, not listening. It's them trying to speak and to express their needs from a very early age. So absolutely, it is one of those things, and I thought that that was crazy when I learned that because you learn that in developmental psychology, and there's psychologists go all about it. But the thing is like it's almost like we've kind of gotten to the point where we're like, oh, your brain's not fully developed until you're 25. So let's wait until your brain is fully developed to start teaching you what you really need to know emotionally. Because
Yeah.
before then, and I'm like, no, like your brain is very sophisticated. If I had learned, you know, at 8 that it was okay to say how I felt and to process my emotions and to be heard and seen and like it mattered, I could have avoided a lot of crap between 8 and 18 that
Right.
I still look back on and wish I had never done or never gone through. And there are those that suffer in silence and there are those that act out because it comes down to the same thing. They don't know how to deal and they don't know how to process because they were never taught.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost think that at some point we got to get to mandatory therapy. And it's so easy to say, well, that needs to happen at home. But again, I go back to if the parents don't know, then how can you expect it to happen at home?
I think there needs to
Um,
be more resources available with that. I don't think
yeah,
it can be necessarily mandated because a lot of people don't react well to
yeah,
sitting
I
in a
know.
chair and trying to vent their life because one, they don't know what to say. But
Mm,
I feel like every individual in this country, in the world, needs to have a trusted confidant.
yeah,
It may not be your parents. That's okay. It may not be
right.
your friends. And if it can't be somebody in your personal life that you can go to, there needs to be more doors opened. That there's services in place that where if you can't afford it, it's paid for.
Hmm.
Or it's covered with, insurance or whatever, whatever solution that looks like, but that you can go and get help on your own if you don't have people who are willing to help you get help, because that was my problem, as I didn't have the right people in my corner to help me get help, and so I had to do it on my own. And I still think that I don't find therapy very useful to myself because if I can talk about it, generally I can work through it on my own. So I don't necessarily need somebody else to solve it for me,
Yeah,
but that space to talk about it, that space to, whether that's a conversation with a friend or with my mom or, like all of these different avenues, there needs to be that space. And the thing is that in general, we don't have that space for everyone.
yeah. No, it's true. It's true. I'm sitting here thinking about like when I was 9 years old, like who did I have to talk to that, like you say, was a trusted confidant. Um, and I mean, I'm blessed to say that I can talk to my parents, but my parents never asked me questions about how I felt, I don't think, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and that's not saying anything negative towards them. It's just it didn't happen that way, right? The questions were more like, well, what'd you do at school today, right? Or whatever. Um, but I'm imagining like if I wanted to try to, you know, under like what I try to do is when I meet kids, I try to be like the cool uncle, right?
Yeah.
I try to put myself in a position where it's like, okay, you can trust me because I'm not this authority figure, right? Um, I want you to be completely comfortable with me. But at the same time, I have some sage advice and wisdom for you as well. And so I want you to be able to come to me and ask me questions and look for answers and stuff like that. And that's why I was thinking about mandatory therapy as
Yeah.
a way to just make sure that everyone has someone like that available to them, you know? Because I think a lot of times kids will turn to other kids because like, who else are you gonna go to? You know what I mean? Everyone is kind of a narc at that age.
And the thing about that is like, if the kids are going to other kids, if because I was always that friend that seemed like a little bit more mature and on the adult
Mhm.
side of
Yeah.
kids my age. So if you're going to another kid, normalizing getting help for your friends. Because so many people hear stuff like that and they know that something's going on in their friend's house and they're like, "Oh, well that was a secret, I can't tell." Like we
Mhm.
need to teach people what are secrets worth keeping and
Mhm.
what are those things that you're facilitating a bad environment because you're not stepping in and you're
Yeah.
not speaking up. And we had a seminar about that in college where they were saying, if you see something, say something. Well, if you
Right.
see something as a child, you should be saying something too. And I don't know, I think it goes back to that generation of when children were seen and not heard, to
Right.
where they felt like they couldn't speak up and they couldn't say what they were going through. But that's the shift we need. Is kids should be such a high priority in rearing our society and planning for the future, that they are listened to, because they see and hear a whole lot more than we do.
Yeah.
And their belief in things and like their viewpoint on things is so tangible and valid, that I feel like sometimes it's out of pocket, but they should still be heard, even if we don't necessarily take to heart what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's facilitating that environment that they're heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question for you. Oh no,
Sure.
I think I just lost it. Hold on, wait a minute. It's gonna come back to me. It's gonna come back to me. I was thinking about my friend. I was thinking about, oh, okay, feelings. That's what I wanted to ask
Hmm.
you. Feelings. All right. One thing that I am trying to get better at is simply expressing how I feel. But the one thing that I still feel pushback on
Hmm.
is how valid are my feelings, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
I
You
think we
know?
all ask that to ourselves.
Yeah.
Biggest thing that I think of is, when are you feeling what you're feeling?
Mm,
So, a scenario that I like to put out there is, if somebody has, if you're in a conversation and somebody says something that offends you, are you reacting in that moment? Are you feeling that feeling in that moment? If you are, I genuinely encourage to not react to that feeling. Like, you may feel it, but don't necessarily act on it. I use my family as my own example because that's all I've got. But I started practicing neutrality versus reactivity. And the idea of neutrality is that you are so content in your existence where you are that you're almost bored, like, at any given time. And the idea behind that is, if you are almost bored at any given time, if something happens, you're not jumping to the first emotion that situation brought up. You're giving your brain time to think, okay, well, this happened. How how do I really want to react? How do I really feel about this? Is this an appropriate feeling? And and when you give your brain time to answer that question, then you can say, okay, they didn't mean it like that. So back around Christmas time, my sister was getting married, and we were at my grandparents' house, or we were at my great grandmother's house having lunch with her and my grandparents. And my nana said something about, you know, I could fit into my sister or into my nana's wedding dress, but my sister could not.
mm.
If you had said that to me probably 6 months prior, I would have immediately thought that you were body shaming my sister and would have gotten upset about that. And like,
Yeah.
most people would. They were like, that's a fat comment or whatever. And, because I was practicing neutrality, I was like, is she meaning to bash my sister's weight right now? Or is she simply stating a fact of the size of the dress would not, fit my sister? And like, what was the context of it? And based on how she was speaking, her body language, the words that came out of her mouth, looking at the picture as a whole, I didn't get upset. because I gave her that I gave my brain the opportunity to process all of the information, not react to the first impulse that came to mind. So that's always like the first thing that I like to tell people. The other thing is like it's okay to feel any emotion for a small moment, but don't let it run rampant. So, that if something happens or, you're existing in a state and like you wake up and you just feel sad one day, one, ask yourself what, like, has something happened to make you feel sad? If you do know, great. If you don't know, that's okay. Give yourself space to feel sad. Say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to lay in bed an extra hour today, but then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go because feelings are often unreliable in the sense of like long-term life
Right.
because there's they're so fleeting. Feelings are such a fickle thing. They are valid. You should feel them when you feel them, but like you can't latch onto one feeling and let it control your whole day. Like there is still like that self-mastery side of it. And a lot of the times I find, because I have depression. So when we're talking about mental illnesses, there are days I wake up and I feel sad. And I can't describe it, and I can't understand why. But I noticed, when I am more mastery over myself than others, I can oftentimes say, find the reason why I'm feeling sad or chalk it up to the adversary is playing with me right now.
Yeah.
Like he is using this mental health condition that I have to prevent me from doing something I should be doing. And then I make a choice, and I'm like, I'm sad, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that's a big thing. It's like, don't ignore your feelings. Give them that space. Allow, recognize them, feel them for what they are, but then make a conscious choice to do what you've got to do anyway. Because if you don't control your feelings will control you.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you consider that to be emotional education, mental education? How are we labeling this? Because I'm still thinking about teaching this to the babies.
Absolutely. Um, honestly, it's a well-being. Like it's
Yeah.
all about a whole, they say that well-being is all of those put
Yeah.
together. So your entire well-being is based on where you are emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, all of the things. Like, so I do think that it leans more onto the mental and emotional side of that, but I feel like you can teach it to encompass all of it.
Yeah.
Spiritually, because I have a spiritual knowledge base and a spiritual foundation, I can say, okay, that's the adversary. If
Yeah.
you don't know the adversary, if you don't believe in the adversary or, haven't been taught that, you need that. You need to be able to recognize where the voices are coming from, where the trains of thought are coming from so that you can say, get away, or you can
Yeah.
say, I'm not today, Satan, not today.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah.
so absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is like we need people to share personal experiences. When we're teaching the little babies, they are like sponges. So
Mhm.
when, you're teaching a little child, you need once think I think about how Christ taught us. He taught us in stories that were relatable to what we would understand. Not necessarily the grandest portrayal of the lesson that he could give us, but the most simple, basic terms of how, we should respond and certain things like that. And so definitely start it with a story, kind of like I did. Start it with a personal experience. Talk about the feelings. Talk about like what came up in that moment. I was angry. I was frustrated, and a big thing is don't make it out to be like there's a lot of power in I. I felt angry. Not
Mm.
my nana made me feel any
Right.
type of way.
Right.
Like
Right.
we need to teach it as we have the control. Like teach what domain of control looks like. That is one of my favorite thought processes that you
Mm.
see in psychology is the idea of the domain of control.
Okay.
Anything that resides within my skin, I
Hmm.
have control over. I can control my breathing. I can control my heart rate. I can control my feelings, what I do with my body, how I can control stress responses. There's so much that you can mind over matter in
Right.
it. But if it is outside of your skin, even if it is right here,
Hmm.
you can't control that.
Yeah.
Only God can. And
Yeah.
so if only God has control of everything out here, well, how much time are we wasting controlling or trying to control what's not ours to control?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have the power to do that. And so when you teach, little kids or middle schoolers or high schoolers or anybody really, the idea of what they have power over, and you give them the acceptance to embrace that power, to take up that space, then you breed a generation that is not playing victim to everything that happens to them in society. One of my favorite quotes is, life is not about what happens to you, it's about what you choose to do with what happens.
Yep.
So anything can happen to me. I can, be poor. I can experience domestic violence. I can have my parents divorce. I can be neglected and abandoned and abused and like all these kind of things. But I still get to choose at what point does that define me? At what point do I have to say, sucks that that happened? That,
Yeah.
I hurt. I was sad. I was invisible. I felt all these things. However, I'm not going to make that the defining characteristic of my life. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do better. And so when you teach that domain of control, one, you give people permission to let things go.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge thing. I learned all of this after losing my dad. The one thing grief gave me is a no BS filter, because I was so exhausted. I had all of this mental energy engaged in the idea of, processing this loss, that I didn't have a whole lot left over to be dealing with or worrying about everybody else. I was like, I'm trying to breathe. I am trying to get through the day. And because I can only focus on that right now, I don't have the energy to perform for anybody else or worry about what anybody else thinks about me or worry about what anybody else is doing. Like, it was literally, let them do what they're going to do and focus on yourself, because that's all I had. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to develop this, because when you talk about the domain of control, that's what it is. Any form of trying to control somebody else is a manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
You are manipulating people down to changing who you are to fit a scenario. And I thought that that
Mm.
was so fascinating, because if you are people pleasing, if you are trying to, be the likable person and make everybody your friend, you are manipulating them, because
Mm.
you are not being yourself. You are
Wow.
not showing them who God intended you to be. You are trying to make them like a version of you. And that is a manipulation. And when I heard that, I was like, holy crap, pump the brakes. I have thousands of questions. And then I started to see it, and I saw it in other people. And that was really the craziest thing, is I got to the point where people were making me mad, like physically, tangibly wanting to slap them across the face, mad, because I was watching them perform for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why? Why are you expending all of this energy to box yourself up and say, oh, I'm only going to show them this much because this is the only portion of me they're going to like, or the only portion I feel safe sharing, when you can be with yourself and let them respond how they're going to respond? Let them do what they're going to do. You can't control that. All
Yeah.
you can control is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot more energy now to be me. And I find it way easier to be me and just, embrace all of it and exist as I am and let people respond how they're going to respond, because those that are meant to be in your life will.
Yep.
And if people don't like you for being you, okay, great. They're not meant for you.
That's
But
it.
if you don't give them the opportunity to know you, then you never know. And it gave me so much peace, because when I let that fall and I let that go and I didn't try to control everything, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is so much easier. I'm not as anxious anymore. I'm not walking into a room overthinking and analyzing every situation I'm in. I'm existing as me and, responding to the environment by what is needed
Yeah.
while still being myself. I no longer compartmentalize who I am into, church Isabella and school Isabella and work Isabella. Like, it's all Isabella, and Isabella is just here and she's getting to live her life, and this is what you get to see.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it definitely takes into consideration for that. And that is what I would love to have taught in schools, because so many issues could be solved if that was taught in schools. You
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the peer pressure. You don't have people bullying you, because like, if you know who you are, their words can't touch you.
Right.
Like, okay. You think that I'm weird. I am weird. You think I'm a nerd. I am a nerd. Like, it's just there's a lot of control that you get back, and there's a lot of control you let go of, and your energy is where it's meant to be. I think that
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is people stop expending energy where they should never have tried to expend their energy.
Yeah, yeah. And you said something really big there, where it's like that's where the spiritual health connects with
Hmm.
the mental, the emotional health. And it's really hard to detangle the two at some point. I was thinking, the same thing with science. We talked about the hard sciences
Hmm.
being so ingrained in our core curriculums, but as we know, even that has intertwined itself
Oh
with
yeah.
spiritual health. And how are we dealing with that? You know what I mean? It's so you can't get away from it. At some point, it has to become a conversation. But either way, I think it's, somehow, some way we have to um, get this education into the schools, because I just can't see another way for it to permeate our society. I've
Hmm.
I've never seen schools that way. I've always been
Yeah.
a proponent of our public school system. I know a lot of people think like it's horrible, and mandating anything is like a bad thing, but I'm like, we can all read though.
Hmm.
like, like I don't know, but
Yeah,
yeah,
our
I don't.
focus in our schools definitely needs a shift. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's just as important for people if we valued having people understand who they are and their
Hmm.
mental mindset as much as we care about their ability to read and write, our society would be better for it.
Oh,
You
for
know, our
sure.
society would be 100%, and like that's really, we do, unfortunately, we live in a world where not everybody's going to get that at home. In the,
Exactly.
idealistic sense, that's what would happen.
Yeah.
Your parents are meant to teach their children who they are and help them figure it out for themselves. But when that doesn't happen, your elementary school, your middle school, your high school is designed to do that. The amount of people that I know that are like, oh, I don't want to send my kids to public school because they're not being taught things that really matter. And I remember that. I remember that being in high school and being like, oh, I wish somebody would have taught me how to file my taxes. Right. And it's just like we had built this core curriculum of what we thought everybody needed to know, but it didn't touch on the things that really truly mattered.
Yeah.
I don't use algebra as much as I do, mental health
I,
stuff and
I hear
psychology
you.
stuff. And
I
so
hear you.
it's like the emphasis has been in the wrong place for a wrong time. But no, definitely, if we taught this, and plus, if kids can then teach their parents, I do think that there is a point to where parents are old dogs who can't learn new tricks.
Oh,
But and like there is a level of acceptance with that. Like accepting that my parents may never view things the way that I do. They may be stuck in that mentality of, well, I'm your parent, you respect me type of, thought process. Whereas I'm like, respect is earned and respect is maintained by that relationship. So they may stay that way forever, and I cannot change that, and that's okay. Like that's where that doesn't mean that I need to take that same train of thought down to when I become a parent. And so like there is that ripple effect. We have the ability to raise up a generation that is better than the one we had before and better than the way that we grew up. And that starts, one, it starts with individuals as parents and making those changes and bringing the family back together and what that looks like and stop this, you know children being born in chaos. But until that occurs, I think schools can facilitate that. Absolutely, can definitely help maintain a better idea of what it looks like to be in a family and what it looks like to know who you are and to be a positive member of society. And I 100% agree with you. We definitely need to move that into schools. And I think, no matter what the trial is, if people have that foundation, you know, if people have that basis of knowing who they are and how to respond, or how they want to respond to any given situation, things like loss, things like grief, things like, all these other of unavoidables that they'll experience later in life can be processed better
Right.
than they are being processed right now. And
Yeah.
so many problems like addiction, like untreated mental health issues, all of these things could be mitigated if we give people the tools they need to succeed earlier. And 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I got two other things I want to talk to you about. Number one, I want to go back to my previous thing that I want to talk to you about because I thought this was big.
Okay.
You said something to me when we first met that I think it's a little too early to say it, but I think it has changed my life in
Okay.
a positive way. Where you talked about this idea, this concept that we chose our challenges and our obstacles
Hmm.
that we were to overcome in the pre-mortal life before we got here. I
Yeah.
said earlier that one of the things that I've practiced for a very long time is finding some positive in whatever happens, whether it's a negative thing,
Mhm.
positive thing, whatever. I always say everything happens for a good reason, right? Um,
Absolutely.
Right. But I think the really cool thing that you did there was instead of using this very ethereal everything happens for a good reason, it's like, no, no, no. You chose this,
Yeah.
right? And because you chose this, you knew that you can overcome it. You knew that it was going to be, I don't know, some great thing in the grand scheme of things.
Hmm.
Explain that, please, and how that works for you. Explain like how you use it and how does you even come about this concept?
Yeah. Can I bring scripture into it?
Please,
Okay.
please.
So I have my scriptures right here. That's what I'm grabbing. The
Okay.
first place that comes to mind when I think about this is in Abraham.
Okay.
So if you go to Abraham, I believe it's section or it's I think it's chapter 3 or 4. Hang on one second, I'm flipping to it. So in getting there. So in Abraham, so for those that might be seeing this that aren't members of our church, a main thing to consider is that we do have additional scripture. The books that we're pulling from right now were logs or scrolls of Egyptian text that was recovered by the church in the earlier days that Joseph Smith used the exact same tools he used to translate the language of the Book of Mormon into English. He used those same tools to translate these from Egyptian into English as well. And they cover a lot of what you see in the book of Genesis. So, that context in mind, we're going to go to Abraham. Um, it is chapter 3. It's verses. Um, so, the whole context is going to be verses 22 to 26, but I'm only going to read
Okay.
verse 25. And it
Gotcha.
says, "And we will prove them herewith to see if they will do all things whatsoever the Lord their God shall command them."
Mhm.
So when we talk about this plan of, salvation, and we talk about the premortal existence, we know that there was this grand war in heaven. That's talked about in every book of scripture, this grand war in heaven that occurred. And, God presented his plan, and Satan stood up and said, "Look,
Oh no, I lost you. No.
I
Okay, you're back now.
okay." Um, so, when we're reading that verse, we're talking about the plan of salvation and the premortal existence, right?
Hold on 1 second, Isabella. I'm going to plug in my Ethernet cable. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. So we were go ahead.
Yeah, so we were talking about the premortal existence, and in this plan, premortal existence, the great plan was presented. And a lot of people say that it was just the bare essentials of it, and I view it as something that was a lot more detail oriented than what we assume. So, you have Lucifer's idea of the plan being that every soul will come back, but he gets all the glory and nobody gets a choice.
Mhm.
God said, nope. And then you have Christ who came and he said, no, everybody will get a choice. I will go and provide the way for them to come back and for them to have salvation and grace. And Father, you get all the glory. So we know how that storyline goes. So one of the things that, loss brings, a lot of like thought of the afterlife, of the before life, just kind of processing, how this happened. And a common theme in my life has been this hindsight being where you find God.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of things happened to me that in the moment I was like, I don't this makes no sense. I'm
Right.
reading my scriptures. I'm studying the way that I'm supposed to. I'm doing everything that you ask me to do. Why am I still struggling? Why am I still in this awful state? And like it never made any sense. So the idea is that I've come to be, and this is completely the gospel according to Isabella. But I do believe that when we were organized into our family units, God sat us down in what I assume to be a conference room, and said, "Your family is going to have to experience these things." And I don't know if that was like every single thing or if that was like the big, statement pieces of our family life, right? And so, my mom had fertility issues. She, could only have my sister. The amount of times that her and my dad tried and lost pregnancies and didn't, all of that stuff, could only have my sister. So if God knew this was going to occur and he tells this to my family, I truly believe, knowing me and knowing my sister, that I would agree to go through what I consider to be a version of hell,
Right.
and experience all these terrible things with the promise and the guarantee that if I stayed close to God and relied on my faith, that
Mhm.
it would all work out and I would find my family exactly when I needed them. And
Mhm.
there are small things like that that I don't believe is coincidence. So, things like, had anything in my life, my first 18 years of life changed from the
Mhm.
domestic violence to the name change to the moving to all of the other little pieces that lined up the way that they were supposed to line up, if any of that had changed, I wouldn't end up where I did to meet my family. Like it was almost kismet that it occurred the way it had. And the funniest thing is when I moved in with my
Hold on. I'm
adopted
sorry.
family.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I've tried very hard not to interrupt you this whole time, but I got to interrupt
you're
you this
good.
time.
Go for it.
Kismet. What is that?
Yes. So kismet is kind of the idea of like when something is perfected perfectly the way it's meant to be. Like
Mm.
it's fate almost.
Okay.
And it's basically another word for that. So when you think about kismet,
Mhm.
I'd have to look up the actual definition of it, but
But like when something happens like perfectly,
yeah, when it happens, like,
kismet.
and there's no, like, you could call it coincidence, but like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
almost too perfect to be even a coincidence. Um, and like those moments for me was after I moved in with my with my adopted family, every member of my biological family who could moved back to the Northwest. And they
Mm.
picked up their lives in the Northwest as if they never moved to the South at all.
Wow.
And like my older sister, she's one of my favorite examples. She moved to the South, got married when she was 17, had my oldest nephew, and then ended up, separating from that marriage, moving back to the Northwest, picking up with her high school sweetheart, who I knew she was meant to marry at 13,
Mm.
and now they have 4 kids together and are happily married. And it was like she never came to the South at all,
Hmm.
except for having my nephew.
Okay.
Her life picked up exactly where she left it when she moved away. And my biological mother is back there, and my other sister's back there, and even my brother, who was incarcerated at the time all of this happened, has since left the South. So then you ask the question of why.
Yeah.
Why did we have to move here? Why did we come here at all if everybody was able to go back to the Northwest and pick up their life?
Yeah.
If we never moved here, I never would have met my adopted family. And then there's like really weird things. Like I remember showing you pictures when we first met of my family.
Mhm.
I don't look nearly as much like my biological family as I do my adopted family. And like the personality matches and like I've always felt like I was different
Yeah.
than my biological family. And then I get to my adopted family and we're like peas in a pod. And it felt like that missing puzzle piece had come home. And there's like one of the coolest things was my adopted family actually started fostering like went through the process of being foster parents because they felt like they were missing something in their lives and missing a piece of their family. And then here I come into their lives, and it's been perfect ever since. Like they actually stopped fostering within the first year
Mm,
that I moved in. And then, there's also the beautiful idea that, if choice was really brought into it, and I might get emotional talking about it, um, but if we really had the opportunity to choose, and you would have told my dad that in order for his girls, that's what he called us, my mom and my sister and I were his girls, in order for his girls to reach their fullest potential, to do everything that God had designed for them to do in our lives, that the only way for us to reach that would be to experience losing him
mm,
and figuring out how to live after him. I think he volunteered for that. It brings me peace to think that, because my dad was weird. He would always it was like he knew that his time was running out. It was like he knew that we were about to lose him. And, changes in his behavior, he became more, intentional with his words and telling us how much he cared about us and loved us. And, he would make jokes about, well, what if I never come back? And like we would be like, don't talk about that. But there was something he knew. And so the
mm.
idea is that if we're given more choice in the pre-existence than we assume, then when these bad things happen, there's a popular thing you see on social media where they're like, if God, saves his toughest battles for his strongest warriors, you know, like that kind of mentality. And I'm like, well, what if it's not that you're necessarily his strongest warrior, but you're the
Right.
warrior who agreed to go through it?
Right.
You're the one that said, God, I got this,
Right.
and you're like, if you can handle it, because if you couldn't handle it, then his plan would be, disrupted anyway.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of foreordination that we talk about in scripture. And I think with like the big stuff, you do have that. I think prophets were foreordained to be prophets. And,
Yeah.
like pieces of their lives fell into place that way. But I think that there was a lot more choice in the pre-existence than just saying, I will follow your plan. And so
Yeah.
with that, like it makes those hard moments easier, because the big question is, well, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, it's because good people decided to have bad things happen to them,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I'm like, okay, I can get through this, because Isabella, who had all of the information, knew that she could handle it. Even if I don't feel like I can handle it right now.
Right.
you know,
Right.
that I feel like there was that choice there.
Yeah. I'm I'm going down all these avenues with this whole thing. Like it again, it's so interesting because it's been such a big part of my life, a big part of my spiritual beliefs and the way that I deal emotionally and mentally with things. It's something that I've preached and I've taught and I've talked about most of my life.
Hmm.
That has, like you said, really has brought me peace. And so to hear it detailed in such a different way, but have somewhat of the same effect. Or
Yeah.
at this point, I'm going to say to have the exact same effect, um, is just really kind of blowing my mind. I'm curious though, for you, what does this look like for you in just a day-to-day thing, or does it even come up in your day, or is it only reserved for like big stuff?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I feel it in a day-to-day sense,
Okay.
because there is that choice, the basic choice of we decided to come here. So
Yeah.
every day we live here is confirmation of that choice.
Okay.
Each day we're here on Earth. I do think that there are moments when I do feel that hindsight a little bit more than others, and it's not necessarily big moments, but just impactful ones. Like a couple weeks ago, I hit a deer and it saved my life. And so like it does give me a little bit more of that perspective of, okay, well, like this happened the way that it needed to happen. And God had me here. And so when it comes to choices like that, I definitely think I see, with this perspective, I see God's hand and how he's working a little bit more. Because, like when we talked about losing my dad. So my life, I was actually living in Idaho 5 months before we lost my dad. My life blew up. Um, Stuff at my job got really terrible. I had changed my major. I wasn't going to school the next semester. I was kind of in this limbo. And I knew that it was time to come home. It was like God was saying, go home.
Hmm.
And I didn't know why. And I just, I was like, okay, like if I have to start over, I'm going to do it at my home, in my hometown where my school has a medical, school in it. Like there's a medical school here in Monroe. And then, like my parents were saying, I think it's time to come home. And like all these kind of things. And then 5 months later, we lose my dad. And my mom is like, I couldn't have called you to
Right.
tell you that. Like I would have
Exactly.
sent state police to your house
Hmm.
to tell you that your dad was gone. And I
Yeah.
was like, and I probably wouldn't have made it home
Hmm.
because that was like my mental health was that bad. I was
Yeah.
already thinking of taking my own life and, just in that limbo of like, it doesn't really matter that I'm
Right.
here. Am I
Right.
really doing anything that counts? And to have like to be alone when I lost my dad,
Right.
it would have completely destroyed me. And
Yeah.
so, like I look back at those kind of things and I do see God and I do see him there. And I'm like, okay, I see your plan playing out here. And like the confirmation that I get in little things. Like I tell my stake president my new plan of my career and what I want to do. And he says, I get goosebumps, you know,
Mhm.
and just different confirmations like that, where if I'm ever in doubt that I am on the right track, or this is what he wants me to be doing, there will be a moment to where I'm like, I get it. And the other good thing I like with that is like it helps me follow promptings a little bit better. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
there the amount of times I was meant to be somewhere doing something and God called me a different way. And
Right.
I was like, I don't know why I'm meant to have this conversation with somebody right now until like they say, you didn't even know what I needed to hear
Mhm.
and you spoke to me and like
Mhm.
you affected me. And it was like, but that's God. Like I am just a mouthpiece here. And so when you talk about mental health and you talk about, understanding things, I do think that that spiritual side has a large part to play in that. And like having knowledge behind it and impacts that too. Like being able to study the scriptures and say, okay, well, I see that this is the adversary impacting my life right now. Or like, yes, I have depression, but Christ felt all of that. And he, died for all of that. And so if he took that all upon him and he knows what that is, I can never truly be alone
Yeah.
because he's experienced it. So yeah, it does kind of shape, I think it shapes my like perspective entirely in sense of like it's shifted the core idea of how I think and how I change, act in different things. Um, and just making it a little bit easier to see the reasoning behind a lot of things that happen and just being like, okay, God, like I know that that was you and then
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes sense. And or being like, oh my gosh, like you kept me from this really bad thing and
Yeah.
this wasn't meant for me.
Right.
And I no longer see it as well, why are all these bad things happening to me? I see it as
Mhm.
like, how is he going to use this to shape my life, and did I agree to this?
Right. Right. Yeah. I'll be really interested to see how other cultures around the world
Yeah.
depict these sorts of things because it's a very common American trope um, of having um, not necessarily divine intervention, but like this was always meant to be type of
Hmm.
thing or destiny. I think it's a very American concept. Um, but I really like your thing though because it gives a much more tangible idea to this thing that happened like you said in the pre-mortal life. I can't help though, like I love sci-fi.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this last night. I was anticipating talking to you and I was thinking about this. I love sci-fi and it's weird because not I don't like all sci-fi, right?
Right.
Like the sci-fi that I like has to have some semblance of reality. Like it has to be something that can possibly happen,
Right.
right? And that's why I get more into um movies and media that talk about the world in the future, right? Like I feel
Hmm.
like you can get away with a lot more craziness if you set it far in the future versus something like, I don't know, what's the popular one that everyone likes? I get them mixed up. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
They're the same series.
They're the
The same
same?
world.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been into it, and I think it's just
Yeah.
because it's not set in the future. I think if they set it in the future, I'd be like, okay, well, maybe this could happen sometime far into the
Yeah.
future or something. But I just can't get into it. But anyway, my point in saying that is I'm imagining like a sci-fi movie, okay?
Hmm.
And you have this soul in the premortal life. And the angels or God or someone is like, okay, time to pick your meat suit, you know?
Yeah.
This is what this one has versus this is what this one has. And you can't know exactly kind of where this is going to take you, but you can at least have an idea of what issues or problems you may encounter based on the meat suit that you're getting and possibly the family you're going to be born into.
Right.
I'm spitballing here, right?
Yeah.
But I have this movie in my head right now, right? And so I'm imagining like this soul kind of like going, kind of like this one. I don't really like this one. Oh, I can deal with this one. Yeah, I like this one.
Yeah.
And then now, so you get to Earth, you're in this temporal existence or whatever. And I'm just imagining someone you like crying, saying like, "Hey, I can't do this." And then
Hmm.
like some like coach or drill instructor character is standing over you saying, "You chose this."
Yeah.
You know? Like,
And it's funny because we that is 100% possible, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like I think that there is a very reasonable part of the plan is that we have that veil that
yeah,
covers
yeah,
our memory. Because if I knew that I agreed to everything, because it's one thing to say you know, but it's another thing to remember making the choice, right?
of course.
So like I can say that I know now and like that helps me get through. But if I had actually been given the timeline and I
Mm,
could remember the timeline, then I'd be like, oh yeah, I got this. This is only gonna last for like 3 years, right? So the reason for the veil is that you have that sense of, autonomy. You get to
yeah,
make that choice.
right.
It's that scripture to see if they will, or to prove them herewith and see if they will, be obedient to everything that they had designed
Right,
without any cheat code,
right.
without any kind of thing, memory of saying, oh my gosh, this is exactly when he said that this was going to happen, right?
Mm,
And, like there's a quote that I loved from one of my professors. He says, all things denote there is a God.
mm,
So every
yeah,
sci-fi world, every, hard science, every soft science, everything in existence denote the presence of some supreme creation and
yeah.
supreme being. Whatever you call that, whatever culture you're in, there's always been, as far as I'm aware, some theory and some presence of a higher authority to which
Right.
we obtain our lives. And then there's the opposite of that being, those who deny wanting to be led by any kind of supreme being and are saying there can't be anything because I want to do what I want to do and it's just us,
Mm,
you know? So like there's all things denote that there is a God. And that's one of the things I love. I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy, love my supernatural world one because I like to think of all like the non-existent characters and like the things that couldn't happen in reality as the worlds without number have I created. So
right,
like there
right.
might be an existence where vampires are a thing. How am I supposed to know? You
Right?
know?
Yeah.
And then the idea, like I do enjoy the futuristic ones because there is so much that we see in like a movie
Mm,
that could have the potential to happen. And
yeah.
like I want to be like, God, did you tell so and so to make this to prepare us for this, potential thing? Like there's all those ones where it was like the worldwide plague,
Mm.
or like, the sci-fi movies about a pandemic and guess what? We had
Oh
one,
yeah, for sure.
and so like is there some kind of revelatory reason for these that we're just not getting
Mm,
until after it? But it goes back into that hindsight part of it.
Right.
Like one of my favorite things is when the LDS church went out and decided, they announced they were going to do 2 hours of church service. And it was going to become a home centered, Christ supported or church supported type of church instead of a church centered, home supported type of church. Didn't know why. Just was like, okay, that's cool. I don't got to be at church for 3 hours.
Right.
But then we have a global pandemic, and you're like, oh, because when everybody else was struggling of how to have church,
Yeah.
because church was the foundation, we studied our manuals, we did it with our families, we were able to, keep going, and we didn't really lose out on those 2 years of being stuck at home. So I think like there's definitely some truth to anything like that. And it's up to us to find out if we're going to use that to shape how we react in the future.
Yeah. I can talk to you about the church forever, by the way. So I'm not
It'll
going to
be a
go down
whole
that
other
road.
video.
But I wanted to ask you one more thing.
Okay,
I won't take up any more of your time.
good.
Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life? What do you think?
I think art imitates life.
Mm,
I think part of, one, if we're made in the image of God,
mm,
back to God is going to be a lot of my answer. But if we are made in the image of God, He is a creator.
hmm.
He created the sky, the ocean, the stars, everything that we see as beauty in our
Yeah.
world that we then imitate through painting it or taking photos or music or, all of that. It comes from we have that desire to create like our Father.
Right.
And
Right.
we're given modes and mediums to use in this temporal existence because we don't have access to the full extent of his power.
Yeah.
It's preparatory.
Right.
If we're able to create things here, then we're, in a good hands and have a good foundation to know how to create things later.
Yeah.
Because, if we become our own creators like God is, there's a lot of theory behind what we will do for the rest of eternity after
Mm,
Judgment Day. But if that's a part of it, then we need to, like, our time here is to learn how to create and to learn
right.
how to find beauty in the small things and to respect life in the way that it's been given. So absolutely, art imitates life. And it is, honestly, I think a lot of the times the best artists are those that are trying to speak with their spirit in
Mm,
a way that their bodies can, can express. And that's a big thing is the idea that our souls is our body and our spirit put together.
hmm.
Our spirit can reside by itself, our body can exist by itself, but we are a soul when they're together. And
Yeah.
so the tangent of that and the back and forth of that and the equilibrium between the two, I think art is a beautiful way to express that. And I think a lot of times, especially with music, because I'm obsessed with music, but when words fail, music speaks. And so when I can't express something I'm going through, or, I can't, cope with it, I can listen to music that is on that same theme and it does it for me. And I can just focus on feeling it. And same thing when I look at art or when an artist tells me about a piece that they've done and or dancing or anything like that. So absolutely, art is imitating life.
You said something, and I immediately got this like crazy thought, like just for fun. And I mean this in a heartfelt way, but it's also a bit sadistic. Like I want to communicate only by music, you know?
Oh, like
Like,
if everything
oh,
was singing, like you
yep,
had
just
to
no
sing.
words, just in my phone, just play a song, and just let it play.
The amount of times I wish that people could understand what I was wanting them to understand because I was playing a song around them.
Yeah.
Like I'll be out in public and I'll be playing a song and I'm like, this is about you. I'm not gonna tell you it's about you. Absolutely.
Yeah. That sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's also cathartic because then you can like they may get the message or not, but you still got to say what you wanted to say.
Right,
And
right, right.
they may not even know. Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you seen the AI music generators?
No, I can't stand them. I stay
Listen,
away from them.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I made a song for my goddaughter that
Okay.
I loved. And it was my first time ever making music ever in my life. I remember when I was like a teenager, I wrote a rap that took me like a week to write or something like that. Um, so the idea that I was able to go online and within probably 15 minutes, write a song that for the most part explained, how I felt about her. And then I was able to then give it to her and let her listen to it. I thought it was amazing.
That's cool.
It, yeah, I mean, it's here to stay. It's not going
It
anywhere.
is. It is.
Not going anywhere.
I
Um,
just know so much music that exists that's been published. So typically I can find something somebody has already written to be like, this is how I feel,
yeah,
and relate through that way. I
true.
think the amount of obsession that I would develop trying to put my own words to music would be
Right.
all consuming. So I'm okay letting other people do it. There's a
Yeah,
reason I
yeah.
don't study music.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing about the AI music thing is that the more time and patience you have with it, the more perfect a song you can get.
Yeah.
You really can. You can really fine tune it. I think they already have like some number one hits that are just
Oh,
all AI.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm convinced.
Yeah. So going back to the art imitating life thing, I tend to agree with you. I think the more interesting argument though is that life imitates art. And I do see it as like a feedback loop for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but I just say it's more interesting because if you say that life imitates art, then it makes you really take a step back and see art as this very important thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked, right? Like you talked about how songs that talk about grief, but I imagine you're only doing that with English songs, right?
Oh, I listen to all kinds of music.
But I'm saying though, but in your experiment, it is just
Oh,
English, right?
yes, language models in English language,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. So I just imagine like that may change over different languages and
Oh,
different cultures.
absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean people use different words for different meanings, right?
Or they
Um
have words we don't even have in our language, and we have words in our language that they don't use too. So absolutely.
exactly, exactly, exactly. And so with that being said, I think that even our art and our media that talks about grief can
Hmm.
shape how we view loss and view grief,
Oh yeah.
right? When I think about art, I see it as a way to take an idea and make it something and commoditize it, basically. Do you know what I mean by that?
A little bit.
So, okay, let me go back to this. So, at some point, you had music in, let's say, Japan, you had
Hmm.
music in, let's say, Europe, you had music in Africa, right? And at some point in our history, people in Africa did not hear Japanese music. The only way
Right.
that you heard Japanese music is if someone from Japan came to Africa and played it in front of you, right?
Right.
Right. But at some point, you were able to then take that music from Japan, make it a tangible thing, and then
Hmm.
transport it to Africa. And now the people in Africa can be influenced and changed by
Yeah, the
that
internet
Japanese music.
has made that huge, has definitely facilitated that with the introduction of like MP3 players and just recording devices in general, 100%. And one of the things I love about art is that it transcends, the human understanding,
Yeah.
right? So like it can be any mode, any medium of art, but the thing is that it'll speak to you or it won't. You'll
Hmm.
find meaning in it or you won't. And if it's not
Yeah.
that piece that you find meaning in, it might be another one. The nonprofit is currently working on its next big event, And in January, we're planning on having a Healing Hearts Gala. And in this gala, it is going to be, we're going to have an art exhibit, we're going to have a silent auction, we're going to have a stage so people can perform musical pieces or spoken words or, any way that they've used art in its various mediums to heal and to
Yeah.
process their grief. And because that's why I say that art imitates life, because we pour into our art our own experiences
Yeah.
and our own understanding. And so it does come from a mortal, lens of, whatever you've experienced while here on earth. But it's in a way that connects to your spirit. And
Mhm.
so each spirit is able to have a different understanding of it. And some of it is God inspired,
Yeah.
right? And so God has spoken to an artist or spoken through a musician to have words written for very specific purposes. I think of there's one where an artist was drawing Christ, and when he was painting Christ, he had um he talked about having all these conversations, and he was told like exactly how it was meant to look, and it wasn't from himself, it was from divine guidance. And you have a general authority now who says that is the most accurate depiction of Christ, like the closest you could get to knowing what Christ looks like. And so absolutely. There's so many different modalities that you can use with art. And I'm so grateful that we have talented individuals who can do that in different cultures and different continents. Because one thing I love is when, something from across the world that I may have never been able to see has
Yeah.
either lasted the test of time. So, happened 600 years ago, but I can still see it today,
Yeah.
or was created 600 years ago, like or 600 years is an exaggeration, but like Mozart and Tchaikovsky and all of these classical composers who make you feel something by just instruments. There's no words, there's no meaning, there's no, what they're trying to tell you to feel. You just feel. And it's
Yeah.
like, all of that. So absolutely, I'm so grateful for having it. And it is a great way for us to be able to express our mental health through different art. I mean, they've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years, using
Yeah.
that as a way to talk about those hard things that we don't want to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the next thing um, that has to happen for the benefit of everyone, um, and I think AI is definitely going to be the thing that does it, is to take this conversation
Mhm.
and easily translate it into multiple languages,
Absolutely.
right? Because conversations like this are also art, right? They're ideas, their thoughts, their feelings. Um, that get commoditized, that's become something tangible that can be transferred to different parts of the earth. And for so long we've been shut out from hearing these conversations because we don't speak the language.
Yep.
One of the coolest channels I follow on YouTube, I forget the name of it right now, but they translate famous speeches
Hmm.
from people in the past. Have you seen this or heard of it?
Yeah, I think I have.
Yeah, so you can go right now and listen to like Mussolini speak. You can listen to Adolf Hitler, and I mean it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Um, that like I remember growing up as a kid, every time you saw a video of Adolf Hitler, they were just like, "Ah, you know,
Right.
but but there were no words to go with it, and now we can actually hear the words in the context. Um, it's also scary too because we know the kind of manipulation that can happen with that sort of thing,
Absolutely.
right? But you know, it's got to happen.
AI will definitely be our blessing and our curse.
Yeah,
It'll connect us in ways that, I think of everything that I'm doing with content creation and advocacy and awareness, and social media is a huge part of that, and making
yeah,
content that has that conversation and is saying those hard things. However, there will be people who see that and they're like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe she's doing that again." Or they want to use it as a manipulation, or they want to twist what I say. And I love it because, this is like kind of like the round off of it all is, if I speak, Anything I say, this goes for everybody. Once you say something and it is put out there, you can no longer control who knows it. You can't
Right.
take it back.
That's right.
So I've gotten to the point where what I say, I'm okay with the world knowing
Mm-hmm.
because I cannot take it back. I don't know who's recording. I don't know, who remembers what I said and tells it to somebody else. So when you get to that level of awareness of yourself and knowing that you're controlling of the control you exude over what you say and how you act can be viewed by anybody in the world. You know,
Yeah.
there are closed captions for almost every form of video service
For
out
sure.
there.
For
So
sure.
even if they're not hearing me in their own language, they will be reading what I say in their own language. So, getting to that point where, we own what we say and we own what we do and we're aware of the power that exists there. They say with great responsibility comes great, power. Or with power comes great responsibility. We need to be responsible for how we're using it. We need to be shifting the narrative into more authentic communication and genuine communication and complete communication. We cannot just talk about the great things that happened. Let's talk about the near death experiences or the days when the
Right.
grief prevents you from getting out of bed. And I am so grateful to see so many different content creators out there who are doing that. And
Yeah.
AI is both like I have actually have AI open. I have Copilot open on my second screen over here because I'm in the process of working on a video. And I was like, tell me what episodes from this TV show give me this message. And so
Okay.
I'm using it as a tool to help me get the clips for my FG2H Friday video.
Mhm.
I use it as a tool, but it's not, writing all of my thoughts for me and making my
Right.
videos for me. And as a tool, it'll save us so much time and make our lives so much easier. If it becomes our crutch, then we stop learning. Why
Yeah.
do we need to learn if we're just going to Copilot for all our answers?
Yeah.
Or Chat GPT for all our answers. So, there's definitely teaching responsibility with that and just, being open and upfront with it in all forms of communication.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I've held you here for 2 hours.
You're good. You're good.
That's
That's how
crazy.
you've got a two-part video right there.
The okay. You know, the problem is, okay, let me just tell you. So when we met, it was definitely Kismet for me. It
Yeah.
was. And I was just like, oh my God. And then when we started talking, I was just like, what? And even now, so you keep, without even knowing it, like you're saying things that's
Hmm.
bringing stuff up that's like, oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
We got to talk about this just real quick. Okay. When you talk about like being your authentic self, when you talk about owning what you say, when you talk about, whatever you say, whatever you do, someone is watching, someone is recording,
Yeah.
and you have to be okay with that, right? This can go down so many avenues, but I do want to keep it pointed though.
Yeah.
Um, so I have long considered myself something of an exhibitionist, a pure
Okay.
exhibitionist, not just like fetish stuff, but like in my life, like I want people to really know me. I think I told you when we first met, like I'm purposely public. And
Yeah.
it took me a long time to figure out the right way to word that because this has always just been me. You know what I mean? And forever, people have always said, "Oh, you don't want to post that, or you don't want them knowing this, or you want to hide that." And
Yeah.
my attitude has always been since a kid, like, no, like I'm me, and this is what it is. This is what I do. This is what I look like,
Yeah.
and you just have to be okay with that. You know what I mean? Um, what does that look like for you when you think about being your author? You mentioned it earlier. You said it was a
Yeah.
very freeing experience.
It is. Yeah. So it goes back to the domain of control, right?
Yeah.
It also goes back to there's a co-theory that goes on with that. It's called congruency. I thought this was a newfound theory when I heard it because I had never heard it before. This idea of being congruent. And, I was like, when I hear congruent, I think shapes, right? You're taking geometry and they're like, congruent shape. It's the same size. It's the same, design. It's the same color. It's the same, two exactly, similar things. And so when I was taught this idea of congruency as a concept that we apply to our lives and to who we are, society teaches us, experience teaches us that, oh, we need to bottle up who we are and slice it off to each person. So, your parents get this much of you, your friends get this much of you, your
Right. Yeah.
significant other gets this much of you, but you're
Right.
never so like this it actually came up in a group setting I was in when we were having this conversation, and people saw it as like not everybody gets access to the same room, you
Yeah. I
know?
was like,
So like
what?
so here's the thing. I see it as one giant library. All
Mm.
of me exists in one space.
Yeah.
Just because all of me exists in one space, I'm not closed off, walled off. If it comes up in conversation, I'm going to talk about it. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
hiding anything or compartmentalizing anything, but I don't give every book to every person,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So like
Mm-hmm.
if the culmination of my memories and my experiences and my stories and who I am is found in all of these books in this library, I can pull a book out when I need it
Right.
to
Of
share
course.
the story, and to talk about it. But everybody has access to that. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that when you become congruent, you are the same everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
the same person you are at church in your Sunday best, living your holy life is the
Mm-hmm.
same person that you are at school, at
Yep.
work, at the grocery store. You're not changing who you are or compartmentalizing this. The idea that you are separating yourself is in essence the opposite of congruency. If you're saying, oh, I'm going through this, but sometimes I have to put that away to be here for somebody else. No,
Mm.
like you can't see it as this separation of any kind because that's not congruent. That is in essence making different shapes and different boxes of yourself and
Mm-hmm.
then just giving that shape to that person or this box to that person. And if you only let certain people in certain rooms and that's all they know of you, you go back to the manipulation. You are manipulating how people see you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being congruent is this idea of like in order to own and be your most authentic self, you one have to know yourself. So for me it was I had to work with a specific type of therapist to like go through subconscious trauma and heal from it, so that way I was starting to see, because I've had three legal identities, and that's a story for another time.
Wait, wait, wait.
But
Who?
three legal identities, so like legal names.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
So I've been known to the government as three different individuals. And so
Okay.
whatever happened at that time in my life was associated with that name. So when
Mm.
I changed my name, I didn't deal with her anymore. I was now
Mm-hmm.
someone else,
Mm-hmm.
right? And 23 years later, I'm having to comprehend that no, it's not. This is Savannah, and this is Gabriella, and this is Isabella. This is all you. This is just what you went through at different times.
By
And
the way, you
really,
look like all three of those names.
thank you. um, Isabella is definitely the go-to or the
So,
preferred
so
one.
Savannah has lighter hair though, lighter hair color.
Savannah is is a bright blonde baby.
There
Yes.
you go. Yeah, yeah,
Gabriella is like a brunette, and
yeah,
Isabella is a
yeah.
blackhead. She keeps her black hair. So,
Gotcha, gotcha.
but yeah, and just like having separated my identity into that one, you get in a negative habit where if you box it up, you
Mm.
are then putting it in a shelf or putting it to the back of your filing cabinet, and then you're not
Mm.
dealing with it.
Yeah,
So then whatever happens to you, you wait until you explode to
yeah.
deal with it. And the idea is that when you're congruent and you're existing as you are, if it comes up that you need to deal with that, you deal
Mm-hmm.
with it.
Mm-hmm.
You process it. You say, I don't have any more energy to socialize right now. I'm going to go to my house and read my book and cuddle my puppies, right? And it is freeing in the sense of that, because when you're talking about this idea, one, you don't have to change who you are for other people. There is no more performance. I had an interesting experience where I watched a girl I knew from one of my classes, and we were in the same choral department. I watched her outside our like eating establishment go from three to four separate versions of herself in about 30 seconds. So she walked
Yeah.
up to me and she knows that I don't play. And she knows like she's not going to be able to pull, one over on me. So she comes up to me in what I assume is her most, closest to being herself as possible.
Hmm.
Slides a flyer across the table at me and is like, "Oh, I'm starting this organization. I'm just going to leave this here." There
Hmm.
was no performance. There was no like getting me to like her. Like it was very natural. It was very neutral in her performance, right?
Hmm.
And so then she looks up and sees a girl who's like one of her besties and her followers, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I see you." She's like, "How you doing? Why aren't you doing this? Blah blah blah." And this was like 15-second interval, right?
Oh
She just
yeah.
switched
Oh
that
yeah.
fast, that fast. And then she went to somebody she'd never met before right after that interaction and was
Mhm.
like, "Hi, so my name is blah, 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 and I'm starting this org." And it was very formal and it was very
Yeah.
professional. And I'm
Yeah.
like, 30 seconds,
Yeah.
30 seconds. It's not like, and there are, people who I talk to that don't agree with this. And they say that, well, what if like that's who she
Is that
felt
a
like
kitty or a puppy? I can't
that is
tell.
a puppy dog.
Okay.
I have two miniature schnauzers in the
That was a
background.
big jump. My goodness. Thought it was a
um,
cat.
but yeah, so like people who disagree with me say, "Oh, well, like it's just tailoring your pitch to an individual." I'm
Yeah.
like, but if you see it as compartmentalizing, if you see it as separating who you are to fit a response like that,
Yeah.
that's not you. That is not all you. Because what if real you is depressed, but
Yeah.
you're going out there with a smile on your face and nobody knows?
Right.
You're not
Right.
being yourself.
Yeah.
And talking about it being draining, you have to constantly walk into a room and think, how do I need to react? Who do I need to be to get this room to like me, to meet
Yeah.
their expectations, to meet their desires, their performances? And you can't control that.
Mm.
Try all you like. You could be the perfect version of whatever somebody needs, and they can still find something wrong with you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't live your life based on that. And so,
What?
yeah, no, the idea of congruency is being the same everywhere and just existing and letting it be, not trying to be on or perform or change or just be yourself. Let other
Mhm.
people see who and what you really are.
Yeah. What do you think is the like number one thing that keeps people from being able to do that? In one way, I think that like politics and politicians, and if I wanted to really get um philosophical about it, I could talk about, you know, leading leading people, leading groups of people,
Yeah.
you know. I think as humans we're always looking for something and someone that we can put into a box that we can say, okay, I
Well,
know who this person is. I know exactly what I'm going to get. I know exactly how they're going to react,
yeah.
right? And I think
I
that's,
think I think really.
go ahead.
Oh, you're good. I kind of knew where you were going with that, but I think the real thing is that one, with expectations and stigmas put in place by society, we feel bound to meet those expectations.
Mhm.
One of my favorite like sayings is that expectations are preconceived resentments.
Mhm.
Because when you set expectations on somebody of how you think they should act, and then they don't meet that expectation, you have this sense of resentment towards them
Mhm. Mhm.
because you were trying to push what you thought was the right way on other people.
Mhm.
And you have the stigmas, you have the way that society says we're supposed to respond and says we're supposed to act. But it's based on this idea of like when you don't know yourself, you try to find understanding and meaning and who you want to be by looking at other people. Right. So you look for that most successful person. You look for the person who looks like they have it all. And then you try to be that. And you
Mhm.
try to be like them, but you can't be like them. You don't know how they got there. You don't know what shaped them, what drove them. Like, so many times when people are like, "Oh, I want to be you when I grow up." Please don't. Please
Mhm.
don't. Don't try to be me when you grow up. One, I'm still figuring out who I am, but two, if you're wanting to be me, You have to go through everything I've gone through. I don't wish that on my worst enemy,
Right,
you
right.
know? And so the idea of that though is that we're in a world where people don't know who they are. They don't know who they are in God's eyes. They don't know who they are in their own eyes. And so it's constantly a facade, a mask. We're all playing a part. But instead of our own part, we're trying to play the part and role of a character of who we think we should be and
Hmm.
who we think the world wants to see. Like, let's normalize being imperfect. We all are, but yet we show perfection and we
Right.
try to pretend to have it all together.
I
And I'm
know.
like, let's normalize bad days. Let's
Yeah,
normalize when you're looking a mess and you're like, this is how all the energy I had into putting into today. Like
yeah.
that was one of the biggest things when I started my social media. I took a year break, right?
Mhm.
From August of 23 until August of 24, I had no social media presence at all whatsoever. And then I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And I wanted to do advocacy stuff and I wanted to reach the kids at my college and all these kind of things. And I was like, my generation and the younger generations are on social media.
Right.
There is no way to avoid social media if you're wanting to reach these people. So I started, got my social media back, did all of that, and then decided I was going to have public professional content pages.
Yeah,
You don't have to follow me or be my friend to see what I'm doing. Like
yeah,
I don't care. One,
yeah,
because I can't control that. I don't want to live in secret. I don't want to hide what I'm doing because I don't know who needs to see it.
yeah.
The other thing is I started doing videos to explain my posts and what I was feeling and why it was important because I felt like a video made more sense and allowed you to connect with what I was sharing than a text would.
Right.
And in that
Right.
idea, like I own it all. When I have a bad day, I have a bad day. When I go months without posting on social media, I was like, look, guys, life's been crazy, and it is freeing in that sense because there is nobody to explain my actions to. There
Yeah,
is nobody to defend what I'm going through because if you're doing the right thing, if you're being you, there's no reason to defend it.
yeah,
There's no reason to put all your energy into making people believe what you want them to believe because you can't. And who cares? They don't have to believe that this is who I am. This is me. I'm the only one I have to prove it to.
yeah.
So yeah, no, the biggest problem is what society says. And society needs to change the narrative as a whole. And one of my favorite quotes is actually in my bio on my Instagram is you must be the change you wish to see in the world.
Hmm.
So that societal change will occur as more and more people embrace reality,
Yep.
embrace sharing authentically and being
Yeah,
congruent and owning all of it. Share your bad days as much as you share your good days. Talk
yeah,
about mental health struggles you have or things you've seen other people have because you never know who's learning from your example.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
50% of the views on my content are non-followers of mine. So people
Right.
I've never met. I have
Hmm.
YouTube reels that get seen, and there are 1,000 people. I don't even know a
Hmm.
thousand people, but
Hmm.
1,000 plus people are seeing my content and putting it out there. And I'm not. It's not a facade. It's not me. Rehearsing this script that I wrote or had ChatGPT write for me. It's me, and it's real, and it's authentic, and it's messy, and it's
Right.
fun. But
Right.
yeah, it's good. That's the way to fix it, is to have more people willing to do it and to change the narrative as a
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that goes back to, the life imitating art. I tell
Hmm.
people all the time, if you don't know, um, I don't know about Louisiana, but definitely in Texas, you weren't able to attend school if you had braids in your hair.
Yeah.
Um, when I think back, in elementary, middle school, even high school, all of us had shaved heads. Like it was
Hmm.
just, it just was not possible, and it wasn't until you kept seeing it in the media over and over and over again. I remember Allen Iverson, being one of the first that was like this huge star that was always on TV, and he was always wearing braids, and it was like a big deal. And I
Yeah.
think slowly but surely society started changing. It was like, oh, okay, well now children can actually get an education with braids in their hair,
Yep.
right? And I remember going into corporate America after school, and it was just a well-known fact that you're not going to show up at a job interview with your hair looking like this.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen, right? And now I tell people all the time, like, listen, like we have to put ourselves in positions and be our authentic selves so that it gets accepted,
Yeah.
right? Across the board. And easier said than done sometimes, but I think it's so necessary. And it does take some courage. And it also takes, I think, some stubbornness
Hmm.
to do it. One last question for you, then I'll let you go. Um, I have a tendency to take everything too far. I'm
Okay.
like all in or I'm all out on most things, okay?
Yeah.
When it comes to exposing myself publicly, and I don't mean that physically, of course. I mean just
Right.
putting my personal life out for the public to see. Um, where is the line, or is there a line? Many times I have friends that be like, you can't post that, or people look at me weird when I'm like recording like I record everything.
Yeah.
I love recording. It's what I do. And so I get pushback a lot. Especially relationships. I get pushback. They're like, don't
Okay.
record that. Don't record me. And I'm like, but this is our life. Like this is us. Like let's record it.
Yeah. I think the line you'll get is from the people involved.
Yeah.
So like I remember I went to an activity in Jackson a couple weeks ago and one of the guys said, he was like, "Oh my gosh, why do you need to take your phone out on the boat?" I was like, "Because I want to take pictures of the lake, right? I take pictures. That's my thing."
Yeah.
And that's in owning that and being myself. Like it's what I do. I was like, go look at my Instagram. You will understand why.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think that I don't think there should be a personal line about what you're willing to share
Mhm.
because it goes back to that you never know who needs to hear it. But
Mhm.
a lot of it is the intention for why you're sharing it,
There
right?
you go. There you
So like
go.
I'll sit down to record a video. It's actually happened to me just a couple days ago, yesterday actually, where I was recording or I was recording a video to explain the pictures I took of this trip at the lake, right? I was recording this video and I was like, I could say all this stuff about the lake trip, right? And I was like, but my takeaway from that day was the car accident, was hitting the deer, right? And so the whole video became about, I had such a great time at the lake. I didn't do the right, like I was on no sleep. I was in the sun for hours. I was driving home. I almost died. And like sharing that experience because you'll find when you're recording, especially if you're not trying to like pause and record and clip things together, but if you just sit down and just start talking, you'll feel it when you're like, this isn't what I need to say. Or you'll
Yeah.
feel it when you're rambling. If
Yeah.
I'm rambling, I kind of know that I need to start over because I lost the point of my message along the way.
Yeah.
And then also thinking about like, thinking about the lens of what you want everybody to see and what you want them to hear. If my brand is authenticity and
Mhm.
I'm being authentic, then if there is a moment that I'm trying to share, I need to share all of it. And that's been to the point where I have 19 photos of me laughing at a ball that I went to for Mardi Gras, and one final photo of me crying in my car on the way home because it reminded me of my dad. And I got overwhelmed. So it's like it is finding that balance, but being aware of the responsibility that you have when you're sharing what you're sharing.
Yeah.
It can't be everything because literally don't live in the moment as well. But like there is
Yeah.
content, and it might be the event happened in June
Mhm.
and I'm sharing it in August because that's how it lined up. And I do listen to inspiration a lot on that of like I should sit down and record these, or I
Mhm.
know what I want to say now. I didn't know what I was going to say then.
Mhm.
But when you do that and you share with that kind of thought process involved, you'd be surprised how often God is going to direct your efforts in what you're sharing and what you're saying. And then if there's anything that you ever shared or ever been through that you're like, I don't know. Maybe hold
Mm,
off. That
mm,
story might not need to be told in that moment because it's response the reaction you'll get is,
mm.
oh, they're just seeking attention.
Yeah,
Or oh, they're just wanting, they're just wanting to get likes and shares and comments. Like put it in the context of what it should be and
yeah,
what, you feel, because like that is 100%. If you are like you have that desire and you are 100% behind whatever you do, you're never going to regret it.
yeah,
You know, I go back and look at posts where I don't look the way that I want to look, and I don't, I'm not talking the way that I want to talk. There was like 3 videos I made this week after I got back from New Orleans. My voice was shot, and it was like very raspy and very crackly and squeaking all the time, and I was like, I'm gonna record these anyway. Like, I'm gonna go back and look at those videos and be like, girl, you sound stupid. But at the same time, it's like that's where I was in
right,
that moment.
yeah,
I can own it. I have several photos on my wall. I do collages of every like year of college. So I've got two up on my wall and I need to do another one.
that's
But it's
cool.
literally those 2 semesters in a wrap
Yeah,
of, from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year of photos taken throughout the year. And
yeah,
it's memories. And there are some of those pictures where I'm like, I don't like who I am in that photo, but it happened.
yeah,
The
yeah,
idea of like you're only going to post a portion because you're worried about how people are going to react is the exact mentality that got us into this perfect life culture that we're in.
exactly. Yeah, exactly,
So
exactly. Yeah,
making sure you are 100% behind your decision
yeah,
to post what you post and posting with intention and knowing why you're posting. Because if you know why you posted it, it doesn't matter what anybody else says about why you're sharing that because
yeah,
you're 100% behind your decision. And that is like I'm so comfortable every time I share something because I knew that that was my intention all along.
yeah. I'll tell you, this is something that I thought about a couple days ago leading up to this because I knew I was going to talk to you about it. And right now, today, I've made a decision that I'm definitely going to take down a couple videos from my YouTube channel. I started it way back in 2009. And over the years, it's changed and morphed into different things. And now I see it more as just like a culmination of my life, an autobiography, if you will, right? Of just video that I've taken and conversations like this. But there are some videos that I've posted years ago just to get clicks, just to get
Mm-hmm.
clicks. And the question that I always have for myself is, well, why do I keep them up? I'm not getting paid on them, by the
Mm-hmm.
way. So it's not a money thing. Um, and it's not like I'm trying to make some statement or something. I literally just posted it to get clicks. And I've had more than a few people over the years be like, take those down. Like, why are they there? And my pushback was always what you said, which is, well, this is something that I posted
Mm-hmm.
years ago. Like, I may not be that person today and post that kind of stuff, but I did post it, so it's still a part of me,
Yeah.
right? But now that you mentioned, you're like, what is your intention? You
Yeah.
know?
There's also a way to do that to where you can maintain that intention. Like I ran Instagram before I ever ran YouTube. And on Instagram you can have like an archive, right? So
Mm.
I have, a little circle on top of my profile that is archived and it has every story I've posted on social media. And the reason for it is
That's what
that
y'all been doing, archiving stuff.
yeah, because you can arc well, like it's a different procedure. One, I would probably do a playlist on YouTube that
Yeah.
has these videos in it. So that way, if somebody needs to hear it, they can still hear it. But you
Mm.
can own that and say, hey guys, we're doing some rebranding here. We're wanting to get a little bit more intentional with what the message is and the purpose behind this channel is. So some of
Mm.
the videos are going to be moving around, like just owning, that no longer fits your view and your
Yeah,
vision.
yeah.
Giving it its due, saying this has still happened. You're not hiding it. You're not embarrassed by it. None of that. It's just it no longer is serving the purpose of your content. And if that's
Right.
the case, then you can archive it and you can kind of like separate it. And if they want to go view it, I mean, those kind of videos you don't even take down, you just make private. Like that's what a lot of people do is they'll just make those videos private. That content will always be there should you need to go back to it for whatever reason.
Right.
But you don't have to have it as connected to your heart, your, overall image on
Yeah.
social media. And like one of my things is like I keep that stuff up there. I actually had my Instagram still like hacked and had to repost all of the stories that and posts and reels that I had made because I was like, one, I was mad I couldn't get it back. And I
Hmm.
was like, I wanted to keep my content, but everything that I do is on brand of being authentic.
Hmm.
So not going back and looking at any, I don't go back and I don't look at anything and being like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have posted that. No, I said some really hard things on social media and outed some people and talked about how something disappointed me or I wasn't thrilled by this. But it does shape the way that I see those messages and also shows growth. I look back at original videos where I'm very shy at the camera. I'm not making direct eye contact. I'm very, speaking very fast and stumbling over my words a lot. And then I watch as I grow and I get better at it. And I'm like, bear
Yeah.
with me. I'm still figuring this out,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's real. And that's what people relate to. That's what people connect with. And that's why they keep coming back is because I think everyone's looking for real on social
Right.
media. They're
Of
wanting
course.
those people that is just being themselves and somebody
Yeah.
that they can relate to.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the content creators I follow use a term that really hit home for me. He said, "I'm going to remaster those
Hmm.
videos."
Yeah,
Which basically means I'm going to keep those up, but I'm going to completely redo them with the new production value and the new wisdom and the new knowledge that I have today. And
absolutely.
um, and so I think I'm going to do that on some of my like informational stuff because it's needed, you know.
Hmm.
A lot of times my mind, I think to myself, well, I've already done it. I've already said it. There's no need to go back and say it again. But I think
Repetition, repetition, repetition.
yeah, not only that, but I think with today's algorithm, I think you almost have to. You
Yeah.
gotta keep going if you want the message to get out there. Because if the video is 5 years old, it ain't showing up on anyone's radar. Just not. So I think you have to continually remaster and repost. But anyway, thank you very much. I really appreciate this talk. There's a couple other things I really want to go into, but maybe we'll leave that for another time. And again, the F2,
FG2H.
who came up with the logo?
I did. So this is actually our second logo. My first logo looks like this. Um, And so it's the letters in them.
Okay.
And then when we were designing this shirt, this is actually our brand shirt for the
Mhm.
organization. You can't really see the letters on a gray fabric with the
Um,
background. So
okay.
we designed it in Canva so we could put the sparkle background. You can't really see it on camera, but you can put the sparkle background in the letters. And so it's the letters themselves colored in with the background that I chose for the organization, and our colors being purple and light blue and dark blue.
Okay. I like it. FG2H. How much are the t-shirts?
15 for the ones that look like this on the front, and then this is actually my personalized one, but it's got a photo of my dad on the back,
Oh, that's so cool.
and it has
What?
his year and the year he was born and the year he died on it,
That's
so it
so
has
dope.
his memory. Yeah. So those
Okay.
sell for 20, but these ones sell for 15. The front only sell for 15.
Okay. Well, yeah, send me the things. I want to get one for my goddaughter. I know she'll really like that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And absolutely, anytime you want to do this again, I'm down for it. Like I said, it could be a 2 or 3 part video with it being how long it is, but I don't cut conversations off. That's one of my things is, it might take 2.5 hours to get what you needed out of a conversation. So I'm never the one to end them unless I physically have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Because we covered grief, we covered mental health, we covered content creation, we covered self, there's the vast wealth of stuff that you can cover in that amount of time that may have a purpose later on down the road.
Oh yeah. And like I said, man, we can keep going and going and going. No question about it.
Absolutely.
No question about it. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
enjoy the rest of your day and
Thank
take
you.
care of that puppy.
Sure thing.
I know it's ready for your attention.
She is. Yeah, she's like,
Hmm.
Mom.
Hmm.
All
All
righty.
right,
Well, I will
sweetie.
catch you in the next one.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.